He studied natural resource management as an undergrad, and then civil engineering as a graduate student, but was always pulled to food service. After opening his own bakery and restaurant, Runner and Stone, in 2012, Peter became involved with CHIPS in 2014 by organizing a few local business fundraisers, and then their first gala. From there, he joined the board of directors, where he served for 7 years. After stepping away from Runner and Stone in early 2023, he knew his future lay in the intersection of food service and social service, and he was thrilled at the opportunity to begin working at CHIPS, an organization he has loved and respected for years. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you so much for having me.
Could you give us all a brief overview of the CHIPS history?
Sure. First I'll ask who in the room knows CHIPS. I see a few familiar faces. And who here has maybe volunteered at CHIPS?
Well.
And I know a bunch of you now made sandwiches, so that encompasses a lot of the Brooklyn ethical. So that I think already tells you a little bit about CHIPS. We've been around for over 50 years in the Park Slope community. About 50 years at our current location, which is a few blocks down 4th Avenue. We are a community kitchen, so we serve breakfast and lunch 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. We are a pantry program, so twice a week at our location here, we give out a client choice of groceries and fresh fruits and vegetables. 2 years ago, we started a mobile pantry van, so we visit 4 other locations per week and serve about 100 to 150 households at each location with the same pantry service. And then we also have a women's shelter above the operation. We have 9 studio apartments for new mothers that come to us either in their last trimester or with a child under the age of 3, and they have a year with us. So it's a temporary shelter outside of the city system, so it's a private shelter. And we have a director of case management, a director of residential services, and social work interns that work with the families one-on-one, help connect them with services and support that will ideally move them towards independent living when they leave the year with us at CHIPS. That CHIPS has a few different, 2 main parts of our mission, which is to ameliorate food insecurity and housing insecurity. We also rely heavily on a huge volunteer population. So every year we have over 1,000 volunteers. We have hundreds of regular volunteers who come, and we have a relatively small staff for the number of people we serve. And without our volunteer population being intimately involved with the providing of the direct service, CHIPS would not function and would not be as effective as it is.
Did
I answer the question? Yes.
Oh, you surely did. So describe a typical day at CHIPS.
Anyone who's volunteered there knows there is no typical day at CHIPS. There's an outline of what should happen. We open, the staff gets there around 8 o'clock. We start boiling hard-boiled eggs and making coffee at between 8 and 8:30. By 9 o'clock, there's already a line for breakfast, and then from 9 to 10:30, we serve about 200 to 300 breakfasts, which consist of a fresh boiled egg, coffee, tea, a pastry, and a piece of fruit. It's often a protein like some milk or yogurt. Then we have an hour-long break, and then from 11:30 to 1, we serve about 450 to 550 hot lunches. And so that we cook in-house. We also get support from an organization called Rethink Food, which provides about 600 meals per week of the nearly 5,000 that we serve. And we have a group of volunteers in the kitchen who, in the course of an hour and a half, put together about 450 meals into to-go containers, and then we have other volunteers who hand them out. Each meal comes with a choice of sandwich as well, so that there's some type of choice for clients. If they don't like what we're serving that day, they can always have a sandwich, or a choice of sandwich and a choice of fruit. And then after lunch service from 1 to 4 p.m., for anyone who's missed lunch or who wants something to supplement for dinner, we offer sandwiches, fruit, and snack from 1 to 4. The residence is 24 hours in operation, so we have receptionists that sit at the front desk in lieu of security guards, so that the residents always have someone to go to if there's an immediate issue and the director of the residence or director of case management's not around, which is something that I think very much differentiates us as a shelter experience from a city shelter. It's much more intimate. It feels much more like a communal living situation. We're all in the same building, so there are children running in and out of my office. The staff knows the residents and vice versa, and it actually builds a really awesome community and a really safe space for women who already come from vulnerable situations and are in a extremely more vulnerable situation with a newborn that they're raising on their own. So,
how do you quantify the success of the residence program?
yeah, that has been a challenge for us because it's a small residence. There's not a lot of families go through the residence, and the residence started in 1999, so it's a little over 25 years running. And over those 25 years, we've served maybe 200 families. It's hard to say that. First of all, it's hard to help someone in a year solve the myriad of problems that these families face, and the lack of support in general on many fronts, and how difficult it is to navigate the system that they find themselves in. So we organize bi-weekly house meetings run by the director of the residence. We bring in speakers to try and help the families with financial planning, nutritional advice, parent-child bonding, help connect them with resources towards independent living so that they feel prepared to go into the world. But the biggest issue for us is housing. Obviously, it's an issue for folks of means. It's certainly a much bigger issue for folks that are not coming with a lot of financial support. And so that's a tough one for us. Oftentimes at the end of our program, because we're outside of the city system, our residents have to go back into a city shelter for a few months to have access to housing vouchers. So that is an issue that has been taken up by local council members and the city administration, and we're hoping that 2026 brings a change on that front, where just because we're not part of the city system, that we're still recognized as a shelter, and our residents can have access to the housing vouchers, which is the most effective pathway towards permanent housing for someone who finds themselves unhoused. In terms of success of the program, I think we do an entry interview with our families to get a better sense of the situations they're coming from. Do they feel safe? Oftentimes they don't. That's why they find themselves with us. They don't have options. They don't have places where they feel comfortable raising their child. And many of them at the end of their 12 months with us can attest to the fact that they feel like they had a safe environment to bond with their child, those really important first 12 months. And so that is something that we really quantify as success. They feel supported. They build connections through the connections that CHIPS provides, which, again, being a real community-based organization, we have all sorts of people that come with options. Park Slope Parents is a group that always does drives for us and wants to get involved. And the women that live in our shelter often get connected to community groups in this neighborhood that help provide support, church groups that follow them after they leave our programming as well, and help not only financially but also with advice on, we heard of an opening, or I heard an announcement someone had an open apartment, that type of thing, those type of connections. I think that sometimes, well, not sometimes, oftentimes people who come from different economic levels, there's a perception that you do things on your own, when the reality is that you maybe take for granted all of the support that you're provided. And I think that we see that firsthand with the families that live at CHIPS, that a small amount of community support goes a long way in not only empowering them to make decisions in their best interest and not from a position of trauma or fear, but also just actual connections that we all might take for granted through our families and our support systems, that we help provide that chosen family and that support system for them.
Is everyone familiar with the housing voucher program? Maybe you could give it just a brief description of what that involves.
There's a, and gosh, don't ask me the acronyms. There's a voucher called City FEPS and FEPS voucher, which I couldn't even begin to tell you what the acronym stands for. But it is essentially, if you have you're below a certain income level, you're in a different category if you have a child, and you meet certain criteria, then you have access to this voucher, which essentially is the city covering your rent in a private housing, so a rental apartment. It's difficult, even when you have the voucher, it's still difficult to find a landlord who's willing to accept the voucher, because they are then working with the city to pay the rent, so it's not as ideal as a private payer. But legally, they shouldn't be able to discriminate, but de facto, we all know how that works. But yeah, so the voucher system, and along with many of the support systems that the city provides that we could put under the umbrella of public assistance, put a lot of these families in a really difficult situation, in my opinion, because they either have to be earning nothing, or they have to earn, like we've had our mothers come to us to say, if I don't find a job earning $90,000 a year, there's no way I could live outside of public assistance. There's no middle ground for someone who gets a $50,000 a year job, where they still get some amount of support. So there's this game of how much can I earn before all of the support is taken away from me. And the voucher system is another kind of example of that, where they're kind of forced to make a choice between being entirely on public assistance or not having a place to live, because it's really difficult, as many of you know, to find a job that would pay you $90,000 to $100,000, especially if you don't have an advanced degree or a specialty. That's one of the things that we work with some of our residents on, is up-leveling their education while they're with us, or working on their resume to find job opportunities that would be more sustainable economically for them and their families. So.
What ancillary effects do you think the food service and pantry program provide, other than actual nourishment?
And so I think that kind of brings us back to the theme of this talk. I think that, but one of the things I started at CHIPS as a full-time employee in June 23, so about 2.5 years ago. And within the first month, it became clear to me that I thought my job was to help run an organization that feeds people and houses people. And it became clear to me that a big part of my job is also to provide an opportunity for people in the community to interact with those populations and to contribute and give back, which is a really important, I think, aspect of what happens at CHIPS. The direct service aspect of our organization is invaluable, that every day there's 15 people who live in this community oftentimes, which for any of you who live in this community know that it is a fairly wealthy community. They're face-to-face with the people we serve, and they're interacting, and I think that is extremely powerful. I know it has been for me. I've lived in New York City for over 2 decades, but it's not often that I have the opportunity to stop and talk with someone who's homeless, or apparently homeless, I should say, you never know, or talk with someone who's struggling through the housing system. And so the opportunity to actually connect with someone and understand their experience is extremely powerful. And I think a lot of the people that volunteer at CHIPS really feel that, and that is the attraction to the volunteer opportunity, is that they get to connect with another human being whose life experience is so different than theirs. And I think that that's an extremely valuable opportunity and a real strong ancillary benefit, especially to the women that live in our residence. I think they have some of the most powerful stories because they're really some of the strongest people I've met, what they go through, and that they're doing it all with a young child in tow that they are 100% responsible for every minute of every day is kind of unfathomable to me. And that's a really powerful experience that gets conveyed to the folks that volunteer at CHIPS and are supporters of CHIPS and hear their stories.
How important do you think that it is to interact with folks who push us outside of our comfort zones?
Yeah. I mean, I spoke a little about that just now. I would say that I think that concept has reverberations beyond obviously the small interaction the limited interaction I'm talking about at CHIPS. I think that when I've had conversations with folks in my immediate circle, my personal circle, where I'm sometimes shocked at how little they know about populations that they have strong opinions about. One example I'll use is the trans community. That has been an issue of debate in the news the last few years, and it's great that it's come to light. I think that it's shocking to me how many people have very strong opinions about trans individuals without ever having met a trans individual. And so the opportunity to get outside of your immediate, I'll call it a bubble, which sounds derogatory, but I'm using it in a very de facto way. I have a bubble that I live in. I operate in the same communities every day. It's just kind of what happens, but I think that we do have an obligation to pursue opportunities outside of our immediate bubbles, because I think that without interacting with folks, without meeting people firsthand, without hearing their stories, we're not quite fit to have opinions about them. And I think we as voting citizens in a democracy have an obligation to have opinions about these things, and we have an obligation to educate ourselves on these issues. And so CHIPS is another example of coming in contact with so many people. I would say about a third of the people on our line probably have some form of debilitating mental illness and or addiction issues. And I think that interacting with someone like that is extremely powerful, because you realize that it is a very personal struggle. It helps dispel this idea that people have, that people willfully put themselves in positions where they need help. I think that is a really dangerous way to come at social services, this idea that people take advantage of these services, because when you interact with anyone that's taking advantage of public benefits, you realize how difficult it is, how demoralizing it is, how dehumanizing it is, and it's not something that anyone would rightfully choose. It's something that's thrust upon them because they don't have the opportunity or support to get out of that situation. So I think that one of the magical things about CHIPS is that it helps people leave their bubbles for a little bit and facilitates an interaction with other, which I think is really important. And I think in New York City we have the gift of being surrounded by so much other, but we also have the handicap of being a very segregated city, both ethnically, racially, and especially economically. And so volunteer opportunities are ever more important to cross those boundaries in this city.
We have some time, so I'm going to throw in an extemporaneous question that was triggered by something you said. What has the impact of the curtailment of SNAP and the discontinuation of Medicaid, how are these losses of social service programs affecting CHIPS on a day-to-day basis?
Well, when the SNAP benefits were paused and when they were paused, we didn't know how long it was going to last because it was part of the government shutdown. It was, I mean, there was weeks of anxiety leading up to it, so there were actually like a few more disputes and fights on our line, and I think it was a direct result of people just being really anxious about what the future holds and feeling like we need to fight for our food right now because it might be taken away from us. The week that the SNAP benefits were suspended, we saw, 2 days after the benefits were suspended, we saw a 30% increase in our pantry line just from day to day. And that is on the low end of what I've heard from colleagues in other community-based organizations that deal with food insecurity. Some of them saw up to 50% increases overnight. I think it surfaced how precarious so many people are already. I mean, the fact that I think it's 1.8 New Yorkers are benefit from the SNAP benefits or avail themselves to the SNAP benefits tells you already that this is a rampant issue. Like, their food insecurity is not isolated to unhoused people. It's 1 in 5 New Yorkers are food insecure. And so the SNAP issue, when it was taken away, further showed the world how precarious the food situation is. And I actually think it was a really helpful warning flare, hopefully. It brought food insecurity to the forefront and brought it to the front page of news. Then when they righted the ship and started to pay the benefits, now, like you said, we're looking at the curtailment of Medicaid and SNAP benefits and the increased onus put on the folks that receive it. And that, I think, we're all very nervous about, because I think that even if you push the people that are precarious over, there's going to be a significant percentage increase of people availing themselves to food services in the city. And I think that the emergency food suppliers in this city were already at their limits. So I'm hoping it's not the case, but we all in this arena fear that we're going to be at a tipping point where people are going to start to go hungry because the 1,000 nonprofits in New York City that deal with these issues don't have the capability to fill the millions of dollar gap that the SNAP benefit reduction will cause. What will be interesting will be to see. It's an already complicated system to have to apply to get these benefits, which is also why it's so kind of insane, the idea that people would take advantage of it like it's the easiest thing to get. It's a really complicated thing to get and to maintain, and now it's becoming more complicated. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, if folks that are actually able to avail themselves, if they're going to be able to pursue the new processes, which require more check-ins, require more, it's mostly targets what they call able-bodied individuals who they determine are able to work. It'll be interesting to see if the new curtailments are actually legitimate and that they are still hearing people's stories, and but I don't have faith that they are. Yeah. So.